They saw an older black woman in a hoodie sitting in first-class seat 1A, and they made the biggest mistake of their careers. To head stewardess, Brenda, and the arrogant passenger, Gregory Sterling. Mrs. Hattie Washington looked like she didn't belong like a charity case or an accidental upgrade that needed to be fixed. They didn't know that the hoodie she wore cost more than the stewardess's annual salary. They didn't know she wasn't just a passenger. She was the reason the airline had just been saved from bankruptcy. When they demanded she give up her seat for a more important white passenger, they didn't realize they were insulting the mother of the man who owned the very plane they were standing on. One phone call was about to change everything. The cabin of Stratum Airways Flight 902 from New York to London was a sanctuary of cream leather brushed aluminum and the soft ambient hum of a Boeing 707 preparing for a transatlantic journey. In the first-class cabin, the air already smelled of expensive champagne and fresh orchids. Hattie Washington adjusted the oversized sunglasses on her nose and leaned back into the plush embrace of seat 1A. At 72, Hattie had worked hard enough for 10 lifetimes. Her hands resting on the armrests were calloused from decades of scrubbing floors and raising 3 children on a housekeeper's wage in downtown Chicago. Today, however, those hands were manicured, and though she wore a comfortable nondescript grey cashmere hoodie and loose trousers for the long flight, the fabric was Loro Piana, and the watch peeking from her sleeve was a vintage Patek Philippe, a gift from her son Damon. Damon Washington. The name was whispered in Wall Street boardrooms with a mixture of fear and reverence. The founder of Obsidian Capital, a private equity firm that had been quietly swallowing logistics companies and luxury brands across the globe. He had insisted she fly first class to meet him in London for his company's gala. "No arguments, my mama," he had told her over the phone, his voice low and affectionate. "You spent 40 years riding the bus. You're taking the suite." Hattie sighed, closing her eyes. She didn't care about the luxury. She just wanted to see her boy. She was tired. The pre-boarding process had been exhausting, and she just wanted to sleep before the service started. The peace didn't last long. A commotion at the front of the cabin made her open one eye. A man was standing in the aisle, blocking the flow of the few other first-class passengers boarding behind him. He was tall, silver-haired, and wearing a bespoke navy suit that screamed money, but the old kind of money. The kind that resented new faces. This was Gregory Sterling, a real estate mogul whose name appeared on half the mid-rise buildings in Manhattan. He was holding a boarding pass and looking from the number on the paper to Hattie and back again. His face was flushing a deep, irritated red. "Excuse me," Gregory barked, not at Hattie, but over her head, snapping his fingers at a passing flight attendant. Brenda, the purser for the flight, hurried over. She was a woman in her 40s, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and a perfectly sprayed helmet of blonde hair. She prided herself on knowing the VIPs. She knew Gregory Sterling well. He was a platinum partner, a frequent flyer who tipped poorly, but complained loudly if his scotch wasn't poured before the wheels left the tarmac. "Mr. Sterling," Brenda cooed, placing a hand on his arm. "Welcome back. Is there a problem?" "There certainly is, Brenda," Gregory said, his voice loud enough that the businessman in 2A lowered his newspaper. Gregory pointed a manicured finger at Hattie. "There is someone in my seat." Hattie didn't flinch. She simply turned her head slowly to look at him. "I believe you're mistaken, sir," she said, her voice calm and rasping with age. "This is 1A. My ticket says 1A. Gregory let out a sharp, derisive laugh. He didn't even look her in the eye. He kept his focus on Brenda. Brenda, please handle this. I always sit in 1A. My assistant booked 1A. I am not sitting in the middle aisle, and I am certainly not sitting behind. He gestured vaguely at Hattie's hoodie. Someone who is clearly a non-revenue passenger. Is she staff, a relative of the pilot? Why is she here? Brenda looked at Hattie. She took in the grey hoodie, the comfortable pants, the lack of visible jewellery. Hattie had tucked the watch away. In Brenda's mind, the calculation was instant. Gregory Sterling was a known quantity, rich, difficult, and white. Hattie Washington was an unknown, quiet, elderly black, and dressed for comfort, not status. Brenda's smile turned tight and condescending as she leaned over the pod. "Ma'am," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Hattie reached into the side pocket of her seat and produced the ticket. She handed it to Brenda without a word. Brenda scanned it. It was legitimate. Seat 1A. Full fare. In fact, it was a full flex fare, the most expensive ticket possible, purchased just 24 hours ago. But Brenda's bias was a powerful thing. She assumed it must be a glitch or perhaps a system error that gave an upgrade to an economy passenger because the flight was overbooked in the back. "I see," Brenda said, handing the ticket back but not moving away. "Well, ma'am, it seems there's been a bit of a mix-up. Mr. Sterling is one of our most valued platinum flyers. He has a specific preference for this suite due to legroom requirements. I have legs too," Hattie said dryly. "And I paid for this seat." Gregory groaned, checking his Rolex. "Brenda, the doors are going to close in 10 minutes. I need to settle in. I have calls to make. Move her." "Ma'am?" Brenda tried again, her voice dropping an octave, becoming sterner. "I'm going to have to ask you to do us a favor. We have a lovely seat available in business class. It's very comfortable, and we can offer you a voucher for duty-free as compensation." Hattie took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and currently blazing with a quiet fire. "I don't want a voucher. I want the seat I paid $15,000 for. I am not moving." "$15,000? Gregory scoffed loudly. "Don't lie to us. Did you win a sweepstakes? Look, I don't have time for this charade." He leaned in closer, invading her personal space. "Listen to me. I do business with the CEO of this airline. I fly this route twice a week. You are going to get up, take your little bag, and go back to where you fit in. Don't make this embarrassing for yourself." Hattie gripped the armrests. Her heart was pounding not from fear, but from a lifetime of swallowing insults like this. She remembered the 1960s. She remembered being told which water fountain to use. She remembered being told she couldn't try on a dress in a department store. She thought those days were over. She thought that money, Damon's money, was a shield. But she was realizing that to people like Gregory and Brenda, the money didn't matter. It was the skin. It was the audacity of her existence in their space. "I am not moving," Hattie repeated, her voice steady. Brenda stood up straight, her patience gone. She snapped her fingers at a junior flight attendant, a young man named Liam, who was watching with wide, anxious eyes from the galley. "Liam, call the gate agent. Tell them we have a disruptive passenger in 1A who is refusing to comply with crew instructions." "Disruptive?" Hattie asked, incredulous. "I'm sitting down. You are refusing a crew member's request to facilitate seating arrangements," Brenda said coldly. "That is classified as disruption under FAA regulations. Now you can walk off on your own, or we can have security escort you. If security comes, you won't be flying at all. You'll be blacklisted." The threat hung heavy in the recycled air. The other passengers were watching now. Some looked uncomfortable. Others, like the man in 2A, looked annoyed that the flight was being delayed. No one spoke up for her. Hattie looked at Brenda, then at Gregory, who was smirking, already taking his jacket off, as if the seat were already his. "You really want to do this?" Hattie asked quietly. "You really want to kick me off this plane? I want you to follow protocol," Brenda said. "Last chance." Hattie thought about Damon. He was waiting for her. If she got arrested or dragged off by security, it would be a scandal. It would hurt him. She couldn't let that happen. She had to be smarter than them. Slowly, painfully, Hattie unbuckled her seatbelt. "Smart choice," Gregory sneered. "Leave the champagne glass there. It's for passengers." Hattie stood up. She was shorter than Brenda, but in that moment she seemed 10 feet tall. She gathered her bag. She didn't look at Gregory. She looked Brenda dead in the eye. "I will move," Hattie said, "but I need to make a phone call before the doors close. I assume that is permitted." "Make it quick," Brenda said, stepping aside to let Hattie into the aisle. "And do it in the galley. You're blocking the boarding path." Hattie walked to the galley, her back straight. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call the police. She dialed a number saved as "My Boy." It rang twice. "Mama." Damon's voice was warm, instantly soothing. "You on the ground? You ready to fly?" "Damon," Hattie said, and her voice cracked just a little. The warmth instantly vanished from Damon's voice, replaced by the razor-sharp tone of a man who solved billion-dollar problems for breakfast. "Mama, what's wrong? Are you okay? Is it your heart?" "It's not my heart," Hattie whispered, turning her back so Brenda couldn't hear. "They're kicking me out of my seat, Damon. The stewardess, and a man named Gregory Sterling. They said I don't belong here. They're moving me so he can sit there." There was a silence on the other end of the line. A silence so deep and cold it felt like the bottom of the ocean. "They are doing what?" Damon asked. The volume was low, but the intensity was terrifying. "They threatened to call security and blacklist me if I didn't move. I'm standing in the galley." "Stay there," Damon commanded. "Do not get off that plane. Do not let them touch you. Put the flight attendant on the phone." "She won't talk to you, baby. She thinks I'm nobody." "She will," Damon said. "Mama, what is the airline?" "Stratum. Flight 902. "Stratum," Damon repeated. Hattie could hear the sound of typing furiously in the background. "Okay. Mama, give me 2 minutes. Just stand there. Don't say a word." The line went dead. Hattie lowered the phone. She stood in the galley watching Gregory Sterling settle into seat 1A. He was laughing with Brenda, accepting a glass of champagne. He wiped the armrest with a sanitizer wipe, as if cleaning off Hattie's presence. Brenda walked back to the galley, pulling the curtain shut. She glared at Hattie. "I thought I told you to go to business class. Seat 12F is open. Go. Now." "I'm waiting," Hattie said. "Waiting for what?" "The doors are closing in 3 minutes." "I'm waiting for you to realize what you've just done," Hattie said softly. Brenda rolled her eyes. She reached for the interphone to call the cockpit. "Captain, we have a situation." Before she could finish the sentence, the interphone beeped loudly. It wasn't an internal call. It was a patch-through from the ground. A priority channel that rarely blinked. Brenda frowned and held the receiver to her ear. "Purser Brenda speaking." She listened for a second. Her face went pale. The color drained from her cheeks, so fast it looked like she might faint. She looked at the phone, then slowly, terrifyingly, she turned her eyes to Hattie. "Who?" Brenda whispered into the phone. The chairman." Hattie stood still, clutching her phone, waiting for the karma to land. The blood had drained from Purser Brenda's face so completely that her heavy makeup stood out like a mask. The handset of the interphone trembled in her grip. On the other end of the line, the voice wasn't just a supervisor or a gate agent. It was CEO Jonathan Stratham himself, calling from the company headquarters in Dallas, directly to the cockpit patched through to the cabin. "Repeat that, sir." Brenda stammered, her voice barely a squeak. She turned her back to the cabin, huddled into the corner of the galley, as if the stainless steel walls could protect her from what was happening. "I asked you." Jonathan Stratham's voice boomed loud enough that Brenda had to pull the receiver away from her ear. "If you removed a passenger named Hattie Washington from seat 1A. Well, yes, sir. But there was a conflict. Mr. Sterling, he's a platinum partner. He demanded the seat, and the woman she was. She didn't fit the profile, and I thought it was a system error." "You thought." Jonathan cut her off. The ice in his voice was sharper than the altitude at 30,000 feet. "Brenda, listen to me very carefully. You didn't just move a passenger. You moved the mother of the man who signed the acquisition papers for this airline 45 minutes ago." Brenda felt her knees buckle. She grabbed the counter for support. "Acquisition. Obsidian Capital. Damon Washington. He now owns 51% of Stratham Airways. We are no longer a public company, Brenda. We are a private asset of the Washington family. And Mr. Washington is currently on a video conference with me, and let me tell you, he is not happy. He says his mother is standing in the galley." Brenda looked over her shoulder. Hattie was standing there, calm, composed, looking at her fingernails. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a judge, waiting to deliver a verdict. "She is—" "Yes, sir," Brenda whispered. "Fix it," Jonathan hissed. "You have exactly 2 minutes to put Mrs. Washington back in her seat, or so help me God, I will have the plane grounded and the crew replaced. Do you understand?" The line clicked dead. Brenda stared at the receiver. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She hung up the phone and turned slowly to Hattie. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, fawning terror. Mrs. Washington," Brenda stammered, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. I'm so terribly sorry. There has been a massive misunderstanding. A terrible glitch in our system. Please allow me to escort you back to your seat." Hattie looked at Brenda over the top of her sunglasses. "My seat?" she asked innocently. "But Mr. Sterling is sitting in it. You said he has legroom requirements." "Mr. Sterling will move," Brenda said quickly, her hands fluttering. "Please come with me." Brenda rushed out of the galley and back into the first-class cabin. Gregory Sterling had made himself comfortable. He had his shoes off his laptop open and was sipping the champagne Brenda had poured him moments earlier. He looked up annoyed as Brenda appeared. "What is it now, Brenda?" "Why aren't we moving?" the pilot said. "Doors armed 5 minutes ago." "Mr. Sterling," Brenda said, her voice shaking. "I'm afraid I have to ask you to return to your assigned seat in 12F. Gregory froze. He slowly lowered his champagne glass. The air in the cabin shifted. The other passengers stopped what they were doing to watch. "Excuse me," Gregory said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "I think I misheard you." "I made a mistake, sir," Brenda pleaded. "The passenger originally assigned to 1A. She holds a priority status, a very high status. I need you to move." Gregory laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You've got to be kidding me. You want me to get up for her?" He jabbed a finger toward the galley where Hattie was waiting. "I don't care who she is. I spend $100,000 a year with this airline. I am not moving for a hoodie-wearing nobody, just because you made a clerical error. Go tell the pilot to take off." "Sir, you don't understand." "No, you don't understand," Gregory shouted, slamming his hand on the armrest. "If you ask me to move again, I will have your job. I will call Jonathan Stratham, personally." Brenda flinched. Tears were welling up in her eyes now. She was trapped. On one side, the new owner of the airline. On the other, an entitled tyrant she had enabled for years. "Mr. Sterling, please," she begged. "Get out of my face," Gregory roared. Suddenly the plane's engines, which had been humming in preparation for pushback, spooled down. The lights flickered and steadied. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged, but then the pilot's voice came over the PA system. It wasn't the usual smooth, rehearsed announcement. Captain Miller sounded tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Miller. I've just received an order from ground control. We are being held at the gate. Please remain seated. We have a personnel change taking place." "Personnel change," Gregory muttered. "What the hell is going on?" The cabin door, which had been sealed, hissed and began to reopen. The jet bridge bell rang. Brenda stood in the aisle, paralyzed. She knew what was coming. She just didn't know how bad it was going to be. The heavy door of the Boeing 787 swung open. The cool air of the jet bridge clashed with the climate-controlled cabin. Usually a gate agent would step in to hand over paperwork. Not this time. Two men in dark suits stepped onto the plane. They were followed by a third man, Arthur Pendleton, the regional director of Stratham Airways for the East Coast. Arthur was a legend in the industry, a man known for his calm demeanor and ruthless efficiency. He was out of breath, his face slick with sweat, his tie slightly askew. He had clearly run all the way from the terminal administration offices. Arthur didn't look at the passengers. He didn't look at the luxury of the cabin. His eyes scanned the area wildly until they landed on Brenda. "Where is she?" Arthur demanded, his voice breathless but commanding. Brenda couldn't speak. She pointed a trembling finger toward the galley. Arthur brushed past Brenda as if she didn't exist. He walked straight to the galley, where Hattie was still standing, leaning against a beverage cart, looking bored. Arthur Pendleton, a man who commanded thousands of employees, stopped 3 feet in front of Hattie Washington and bowed his head. It wasn't a nod. It was a bow of genuine contrition. "Mrs. Washington," Arthur said, his voice thick with apology. "I am Arthur Pendleton, Regional Director, on behalf of Stratham Airways and your son's board of directors. I cannot express how deeply ashamed we are." Hattie looked at him. "You ran all this way, Arthur." "I would have flown here myself if I had to, ma'am. Mr. Washington called me directly. He is monitoring the situation." Arthur swallowed hard. "Are you all right? Have you been mistreated physically?" "Just my dignity, Arthur," Hattie said calmly. "And my feet hurt from standing." Arthur turned around. The apology vanished from his face, replaced by a cold, bureaucratic fury. He marched into the first-class cabin. Brenda was cowering near the cockpit door. Gregory Sterling was still in seat 1A, looking confused but defiant. Arthur stopped in front of Brenda. "Badge," he said. Brenda stared at him. "Mr. Pendleton, badge now." Arthur held out his hand. You violated Article 4 of the Company Code of Conduct, and more importantly, you violated the basic laws of human decency. You profiled a passenger, you disobeyed the manifest, and you insulted the family of the chairman. You are relieved of duty effectively immediately. You are fired, Brenda. Hand it over." The cabin was silent. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. Brenda, with shaking hands, unclipped her ID badge from her uniform and placed it in Arthur's hand. "Get your bag," Arthur said. "Get off the plane." Brenda, sobbing openly now, grabbed her purse from the crew locker and ran off the plane, head down, humiliated. Arthur then turned his attention to seat 1A. Gregory Sterling looked up, his face a mixture of shock and outrage. "Now hold on a second," Gregory sputtered. "You can't just fire the crew because this woman complained I am Gregory Sterling. I know your boss." Arthur stared at him. "Mr. Sterling, you don't know my boss. My boss is Damon Washington, and the woman you just humiliated is his mother." Gregory's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face faster than the champagne he had been drinking. "Damon Washington. The private equity guy. The owner of this airline," Arthur corrected. "And he has given me very specific instructions regarding you." "Now look," Gregory said, trying to regain his composure, forcing a laugh. "It was just a misunderstanding. I'll buy her a drink. We can settle this. I'm a platinum partner." Arthur signaled to the two men in dark suits behind him. They were airport security, but not the TIA. They were private security contractors for the airline. "Mr. Sterling," Arthur said, his voice projecting so the whole cabin could hear. "Your platinum status has been revoked as of 3 minutes ago. Your frequent flyer account has been terminated, and you are being placed on the permanent no-fly list for Stratum Airways and all its affiliates. You can't do that." Gregory stood up, his face purple. "I have a meeting in London tomorrow. I have rights." "You are trespassing on private property," Arthur said calmly. "Gentlemen, escort Mr. Sterling off the aircraft. If he resists, call the Port Authority police." The two security guards stepped forward. "Sir, please grab your belongings." "This is insane," Gregory shouted, grabbing his leather briefcase. "I will sue you. I will sue this entire airline into the ground." "You're welcome to try," Arthur said dryly. "But I suggest you save your money for a lawyer. You're going to need it." Gregory was guided into the aisle. He looked around for support, but the other passengers, the ones who had watched in silence earlier, were now avoiding his gaze. The businessman in 2A actually smirked. As Gregory was marched past the galley, he came face to face with Hattie. She was still standing there, holding her phone. Gregory stopped. He looked at her, then at her simple clothes, then at her eyes. He wanted to say something nasty. Something to save his pride, but the sheer weight of his mistake crushed the words in his throat. "Safe travels, Mr. Sterling," Hattie said. She didn't shout. She didn't gloat. She just offered a polite farewell. Gregory huffed and stormed off the jet bridge, his expensive loafers clacking loudly on the metal, walking toward a future that had just become significantly more difficult. Arthur turned back to Hattie. "Mrs. Washington, your seat is ready, and we have a new crew coming down. They will be here in 10 minutes. We are delaying the flight to ensure you have the service you deserve." "Thank you, Arthur," Hattie said. She walked back to seat 1A. The leather was still warm from Gregory, which annoyed her, but Arthur seemed to anticipate this. He grabbed a fresh blanket and laid it down, then replaced the champagne glass with a fresh one. Hattie sat down. She exhaled a long, deep breath. But the drama wasn't over. As Arthur prepared to leave, Hattie's phone rang again. It was Damon. "Is he gone?" Damon asked. "He's gone, baby, and the stewardess too." "Good," Damon said, But Mama, I don't want you flying with that crew, even the ones who stayed. They watched it happen and did nothing. Damon, don't be unreasonable. I want to get to London. I'm not being unreasonable. I'm being a son, Damon said. Look out the window. Hattie leaned toward the porthole. Outside on the tarmac, a convoy of black SUVs was pulling up next to the plane. What is that? Hattie asked. I'm not risking it, Damon said. I don't trust them to take care of you. Grab your bag, Mama. You're not flying commercial today. Damon, my private jet just landed at Teterboro. The helicopter is waiting to take you there. But before you go, there's one more person on that plane who needs to learn a lesson. Hattie frowned. Who? The pilot, Damon said grimly. Captain Miller. He signed off on the removal order without even checking the manifest. Put Arthur back on the phone. Hattie sighed. She handed the phone to the terrified executive. He wants to talk to you again. Arthur took the phone, looking like a man marching to the gallows. Yes, Mr. Washington. Hattie watched as Arthur listened, nodded, and then turned pale again. He looked toward the cockpit. Yes, sir. I understand. Immediate effect. Arthur hung up. He looked at Hattie. Mrs. Washington, please gather your things. Your son is right. You shouldn't stay here. What about the pilot? Hattie asked as she stood up. Arthur straightened his tie. I have to go into the cockpit. Captain Miller is flying this plane to London. But when he lands, he won't be a captain anymore. He's flying his last leg. Hattie shook her head. Damon doesn't play, she whispered to herself. As Hattie walked off the plane, escorted by Arthur like royalty, the remaining passengers watched in awe. They had seen a power struggle, and they had seen the underdog win. But as Hattie stepped onto the jet bridge, she didn't feel like a winner. She felt tired. She realized that even with billions of dollars backing her, the world was still quick to judge a book by its cover. But at least now she knew the author of the book could rewrite the ending. While Hattie Washington was soaring across the Atlantic in the silent golden comfort of a Gulfstream G650, sipping chamomile tea and watching a movie on a screen larger than her first television set. Gregory Sterling was experiencing a very different kind of journey. After being escorted off Stratum Flight 902 by security, Gregory had been dumped unceremoniously back into the terminal. He was furious, his face a mottled map of red rage. He had screamed at the ticket counter, threatened the gate agents, and even tried to call his lawyer only to find that his phone had died. He was desperate. The gala in London wasn't just a social event. It was a lifeline. His real estate firm, Sterling Heights, was leveraging massive debt. He needed a cash injection, and he needed it now. The rumor was that Obsidian Capital was looking to invest in Manhattan commercial real estate. If he missed this gala, he missed the chance to pitch to the partners of Obsidian. He didn't know the CEO personally. Damon Washington was a ghost, a man who rarely gave interviews and kept his family life completely sealed, but Gregory knew that if he could just get in the room, his charm would do the rest. He had to get to London. With Stratum Airways banning him, he was forced to literally run to the international terminal of a rival carrier. The only seat left on the next flight out was in economy, in the very back row, right next to the lavatory. So while Hattie slept under a cashmere duvet at 45,000 feet, Gregory spent 7 hours squeezed between a crying toddler and a man who snored like a chainsaw. Every time the bathroom door opened, the smell of blue chemical disinfectant wafted over him. He couldn't recline his seat. His suit was wrinkling. His expensive loafers were scuffed. He stewed in his anger, replaying the scene on the plane over and over. That woman, he thought, grinding his teeth. That absolute nobody. In Gregory's mind, he was the victim. He had been inconvenienced by a glitch and a stubborn old woman who didn't know her place. He convinced himself that Arthur Pendleton had overreacted, that the Damon Washington mentioned was just some mid-level compliance officer flexing his muscles, not the actual owner. After all, how could a woman in a hoodie be related to a billionaire? It didn't make sense. It was a diversity stunt. It had to be. When Gregory finally landed at Heathrow, he was exhausted, smelly and hungover from the cheap wine he had purchased. He rushed to his hotel, the Connaught, to shower and change. He had 2 hours before the gala. He looked in the mirror, smoothing back his silver hair. "You are Gregory Sterling," he told his reflection. "You are a winner. You don't let little people stop you." He put on his tuxedo, a fresh one he had packed in his carry-on. He spritzed on expensive cologne to mask the scent of the airplane cabin. He practiced his smile. Tonight, he would secure $50 million in funding. Tonight, he would win. Meanwhile, at a private airfield just north of London, Hattie's Gulfstream touched down as gently as a feather. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom was waiting on the tarmac, its engine purring. As Hattie stepped down the stairs, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a tuxedo was waiting for her. Damon Washington was an imposing figure. 6'4", built like a linebacker with skin the color of deep mahogany and eyes that could dissect a balance sheet in seconds. But the moment he saw Hattie, the titanium exterior melted. "Mama," he said, stepping forward and wrapping her in a bear hug that lifted her off the ground. "Put me down, boy." Hattie laughed, patting his cheek. "You're crinkling your suit." "I own the suit company." Damon grinned, setting her down. "I can get another one." "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine," Hattie said, though her eyes looked tired. "Just a little shaken. It's been a long time since someone looked at me like I was dirt, Damon. I forgot how cold that feels." Damon's jaw tightened. A dangerous shadow passed over his face. "I promise you, Mama, no one will ever look at you like that again. I handled it." "Arthur seemed terrified," Hattie noted, as they got into the back of the Rolls-Royce. The interior was starry-roofed, quiet as a vault. "Arthur is a good manager, but he lets standards slip. He knows he's on probation," Damon said, pouring her a glass of sparkling water. "But we aren't talking about business tonight. Tonight is about you. I want you to see what we've built. This gala, it's not just a party. It's a statement." "Is that man going to be there?" Hattie asked suddenly. "The one from the plane. He shouted about a meeting in London." Damon paused. He pulled out his tablet and tapped the screen a few times. He accessed the guest list for the Obsidian Annual Gala. He scrolled down to the S section, Sterling Gregory, CEO Sterling Heights. Damon's eyes narrowed. "He was invited," Damon said softly. "Months ago. Before I knew who he was." "You should uninvite him," Hattie said, taking a sip of water. Damon looked at his mother. Then a slow, shark-like smile spread across his face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile that appeared right before a hostile takeover. "No," Damon said. "If I uninvite him, he just goes home. He learns nothing. He loses nothing but a night out." Damon closed the tablet. "Let him come. Let him walk into the lion's den. I think it's time Mr. Sterling learned exactly who he messed with." The ballroom of the Savoy was transformed into a wonderland of gold and black. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a shimmering light over the cream of global society. There were tech billionaires from Silicon Valley, oil tycoons from Dubai, and aristocrats from old European families. Waiters in white gloves moved like ghosts, offering trays of caviar and vintage champagne. Gregory Sterling entered the room with his chest puffed out. He had regained his confidence. This was his world. He grabbed a glass of champagne and immediately began scanning the room for targets. He spotted a few competitors and nodded curtly. He saw the vice president of a major bank and made a mental note to circle back. But his main target was the host. He needed to find Damon Washington. He had never seen a clear photo of Damon. The man was notoriously private. There were only grainy paparazzi shots of him entering cars or buildings. Gregory assumed he would be an older white man, perhaps Jewish or waspish given the name and the industry. He looked around for someone who looked like a patriarch. After an hour of mingling and handing out business cards, Gregory was feeling good. He had 3 potential meetings lined up for the next week. He was laughing at a joke made by a British lord when he saw her. His glass froze halfway to his mouth. There, sitting at the head table, the table raised on a dais reserved for the guests of honor, was the woman from the plane. Hattie was no longer wearing her grey hoodie. She was dressed in a stunning floor-length gown of midnight blue silk that shimmered like water. Around her neck sat a diamond necklace that looked heavy enough to anchor a boat. Her hair was styled high, and she was laughing, talking to a famous Hollywood actress seated next to her. Gregory blinked. He rubbed his eyes. It couldn't be. That hag, Gregory whispered to himself, the alcohol and his temper mixing into a toxic cocktail. He excused himself from the British lord and moved closer. He squinted. It was her. The same face. The same hands. His mind raced. How did she get in? Did she sneak in? Was she a high-end grifter? Maybe she had targeted a rich man on the plane after he was kicked off. Or maybe she was the help. No, the help didn't wear diamonds like that. Gregory felt a surge of indignation. He had been kicked off a plane, banned, and forced to fly economy, while this woman, this disruptive passenger, was sitting at the head table drinking vintage Dom Perignon. It was an insult to justice. It was an insult to him. He looked around. Security was tight, but he was a guest. He decided he would do the host a favor. He would expose this fraud. If he could prove that this woman was a crasher or a con artist, he would earn the gratitude of Obsidian Capital. It was the perfect opening. Gregory set his glass down. He straightened his tuxedo jacket and marched toward the dais. He walked right up to the edge of the raised platform. Hattie was mid-sentence, telling a story about her granddaughter when she saw him. She stopped. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes went cold. "You," Gregory hissed, leaning his hands on the table, invading her space once again. "I don't know how you did it. I don't know whose ticket you stole or who you tricked, but you have some nerve showing your face here." The table went silent. The Hollywood actress looked at Gregory with shock. A French diplomat on the other side put down his fork. "Excuse me," Hattie said, her voice loud and clear in the sudden quiet. "Are you speaking to me, Mr. Sterling? Don't play the innocent act with me." Gregory sneered, his voice rising. He wanted a scene. He wanted security to come and drag her out, just like they should have done on the plane. "We both know what you are. You're a fraud. You got me kicked off my flight with your little pity act. But this isn't a charity ward. This is a billion-dollar gala. You don't belong here. Sir, the actress said, you are being incredibly rude. I'm being honest, Gregory shouted, turning to the room. People were staring now. This woman is a con artist. She was causing a scene on a flight from New York today, refusing to sit in her assigned seat, harassing paying customers. And now she's here. I bet she isn't even on the list. Gregory turned back to Hattie, pointing a finger in her face. Get out before I call security and have you thrown into the street where you belong. Is there a problem here? The voice came from behind Gregory. It was deep resonant and carried a weight that made the floorboards vibrate. Gregory spun around. Standing there was Damon Washington. He looked like a king in his tuxedo. He towered over Gregory, his face an unreadable mask of stone. Gregory didn't know who this was. He just saw a large black man interfering in his business. He assumed it was the head of security. Yes, there is a problem, Gregory snapped at Damon. Do your job, pal. This woman, he gestured wildly at Hattie, is crashing this party. She harassed me on a flight earlier today. She is a nuisance. Remove her immediately. Damon didn't blink. He didn't look at Gregory. He looked past him at Hattie. Mama, Damon said, his voice soft. Is this the man? Gregory froze. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Mama. Gregory's brain stuttered. He looked at the large man. He looked at Hattie. He looked back at the man. Mama, Gregory whispered. Hattie picked up her napkin and dabbed her mouth elegantly. Yes, Damon. That's him. That's Mr. Sterling, the one who said I didn't fit the profile. Damon finally lowered his eyes to look at Gregory. It was like a wolf looking at a rabbit that had just walked into its den. Mr. Sterling, Damon said, his voice calm but terrifyingly loud in the silent ballroom. I believe you were looking for me. You have been sending emails to my office for 3 months, asking for a meeting. Gregory's knees began to shake. I am Damon Washington, Damon said. CEO of Obsidian Capital, owner of Stratum Airways, and the son of the woman you are currently shouting at. The color drained from Gregory's face so fast he looked like a corpse. The glass he had been holding in his left hand slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Mr. Washington, Gregory stammered, stepping back. His hands held up in surrender. I didn't know. I had no idea. She was wearing a hoodie. She didn't look like what? Damon stepped closer. She didn't look like she belonged in first class. She didn't look like she belonged at my table. No, I meant... Gregory was sweating profusely now. The eyes of 300 of the world's most powerful people were boring into him. He could feel his reputation disintegrating in real time. You came here to ask for $50 million to bail out Sterling Heights. Damon continued reciting the financial data from memory. Your liquidity is drying up. Your creditors are calling. You needed Obsidian to save you. Yes, Gregory whispered, desperate. Please, it's a good business. I made a mistake, a personal mistake. Don't let business suffer because... Business. Damon laughed, a cold, humorless sound. Mr. Sterling, you seem to have forgotten the first rule of business. Character is currency, and you are bankrupt. Damon turned to the room, raising his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. This man, Mr. Gregory Sterling, felt the need to demand that my mother give up her seat for him today, because he felt he was more important. He then felt the need to insult her in my home. I think it is only fair that we show him exactly how important he is." Damon looked at the security guards standing at the perimeter. "Escort Mr. Sterling out," Damon commanded, "and ensure that every person in this room knows exactly why he is leaving." "Wait," Gregory cried as two large guards grabbed his arms. "Damon, Mr. Washington." "Please, I'll apologize, Mrs. Washington. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Hattie looked at him. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just picked up her champagne glass. "It's too late for sorry, Mr. Sterling," Hattie said. "You should have been kind when you thought I was nobody. That's when it counts." As Gregory was dragged kicking and screaming toward the exit, Damon pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. "Who are you calling?" Hattie asked. "The bank that holds the mortgage on Sterling Heights headquarters," Damon said calmly. "I'm buying his debt. By tomorrow morning I won't just be his rejecter. I'll be his landlord." Hattie shook her head, taking a sip of champagne. "You are a dangerous man, Damon." "I'm a good son," Damon replied, sitting down next to her. But for Gregory Sterling, the nightmare was only beginning. Being kicked out of a party was one thing, but Damon Washington wasn't done. He was about to dismantle Gregory's life piece by piece, starting with the one thing Gregory cared about most, his name. The morning after the gala, the sun rose over London, casting a cold grey light over the city. But for Gregory Sterling, the world was pitch black. He hadn't slept. After being thrown out of the Savoy, he had returned to his hotel room to find that his corporate credit card had been declined at the bar. He had spent the night pacing frantically, trying to reach his partners in New York, his CFO. Anyone who could tell him that the nightmare at the gala was just a misunderstanding. No one answered. At 8:00 a.m. London time, 3:00 a.m. in New York, his phone finally rang. It was his chief financial officer, Marcus. "Gregory," Marcus sounded like he was hyperventilating. "What did you do?" I had a disagreement with a potential investor." Gregory lied, his voice hoarse. "It's fine, I can fix it. I just need to smooth things over." "Fix it?" Marcus laughed hysterically. "Gregory, you can't fix this. We just received a notice of default." "Default on which loan?" "On all of them," Marcus screamed. "The primary mortgage on the Sterling Tower, the revolving credit line for the Hudson Project, the bridge loan, all of it. The debt was sold at 4:00 a.m. this morning." Gregory felt the room spin. "Sold to who?" "To a holding company called Justice Ventures, LLC, Marcus said. "But the paperwork traces back to Obsidian Capital. They bought our debt, Gregory. They bought it for full face value, and they are exercising the immediate call clause based on a breach of the reputational risk covenant in our bylaws." Gregory dropped onto the bed. Damon Washington wasn't just a businessman, he was a predator. He hadn't just blocked Gregory's funding, he had bought Gregory's destruction. "What does that mean, Marcus?" Gregory whispered. "It means they own us," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "They aren't asking for payment. They're seizing the assets. They're foreclosing on the Sterling Tower immediately. They're dissolving the board. And Gregory, they've removed you as CEO effective immediately." "They can't do that. It's my name on the building." "Not anymore. The lawyers are already here. They're changing the locks, Gregory. It's over. You're done." The line went dead. Gregory sat there, the silence of the hotel room deafening. He had built his empire over 30 years. He had stepped on people-cut corners and ignored the little people to get to the top. And it had all been dismantled in less than 12 hours, because he couldn't be polite to an elderly woman on an airplane. He flew back to New York that afternoon. Not in first class, not even in economy. He flew on a maxed-out personal credit card middle seat on a budget carrier. When he arrived at the Sterling Tower in Manhattan, a glass monolith he used to look at with such pride he couldn't even get through the front door. His security pass flashed red. Access denied. A security guard walked up to him. It was a man Gregory had walked past every day for 10 years without ever saying hello. A man whose name Gregory didn't know. "Mr. Sterling," the guard said, his face impassive, "I've been instructed to hand you this." He handed Gregory a cardboard box. Inside were a few personal photos, a stapler, and his nameplate. "You cleared out my office?" Gregory gasped. "New management." The guard shrugged. "They said you aren't allowed upstairs. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Gregory looked up at the building. Workers were already on a scaffold above the entrance. They were removing the silver letters that spelled STERLING. As the S fell with a clang onto the pavement, Gregory realized the true weight of his karma. He hadn't just lost his seat. He hadn't just lost his job. He had lost his legacy. He stood on the sidewalk clutching his box of junk while the city moved around him. People walked by ignoring him, just another man in a suit having a bad day. He was finally truly nobody. 3 months later. Hattie Washington sat in her favorite armchair in her son's penthouse overlooking Central Park. On the coffee table in front of her lay a copy of Forbes magazine. The cover story was titled, "The Compassionate Takeover: How Damon Washington is Rewriting the Rules of Business." But Hattie wasn't reading the article. She was watching the television. A commercial for Stratum Airways came on. It didn't feature models or actors. It featured real employees. The scene opened with a young flight attendant helping an elderly woman with her bags. The voiceover was warm and sincere. "At Stratum, we believe that every passenger is a VIP because you never know who you're sitting next to. Respect isn't an upgrade, it's our standard." Hattie smiled. "You like it?" Damon asked, walking into the room carrying a tray of tea. "It's good, baby," Hattie said. "But did you have to fire the whole crew?" "I didn't fire everyone," Damon said, setting the tea down. "Only the ones who lost their humanity. The rest I gave them a raise. And better training. We implemented a new policy, the Hattie Rule. Any crew member who stands up for a passenger being mistreated gets an automatic bonus." Hattie laughed, a rich, warm sound. "You and your rules." "It matters, Mama," Damon said, sitting opposite her. He looked serious for a moment. "You know Gregory Sterling called me yesterday." Hattie raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what did he want?" "He wanted a job," Damon said. "He's broke. His friends abandoned him. He's been blacklisted from every major firm in the city. He asked if I had any openings for a consultant." "And what did you say?" Damon took a sip of his tea. "I told him we don't need consultants, but I told him that the janitorial staff at the airport is hiring. I told him that if he's willing to start at the bottom cleaning up after people instead of looking down on them, I might consider giving him a reference in a year or 2. "You didn't," Hattie chuckled. "I did. And you know what?" He took the application. Hattie shook her head. "Well, maybe there's hope for him yet. Humility is a hard teacher, but it teaches you good." Damon reached out and took his mother's hand. Her hand was rough, calloused from years of hard work, contrasting with his smooth, manicured skin. He squeezed it tight. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, Mama. I wanted to give you the world, and instead you got disrespected." "Damon," Hattie said, looking him in the eye, "you didn't give me the world. You gave me a chance to see my son stand up for what's right. That's better than any plane ticket." She looked back at the TV where the Stratum plane was soaring into the clouds. "But," she added with a wink, "next time I'll take the private jet. The champagne is better." Damon laughed, the sound filling the penthouse. They sat there, mother and son, watching the city below. They had won. Not just the battle against a rude passenger, but a victory for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. Hattie Washington had kept her seat, and in doing so, she had changed the world a little bit. What a powerful reminder that true class has nothing to do with the price of your ticket or the brand of your suit. Gregory Sterling thought his status gave him the right to belittle others. But he learned the hard way that when you strip away a person's dignity, you might just be stripping away your own future. Hattie didn't need to shout to win. She just needed to be herself and let the karma and her son do the rest. It makes you wonder how many times have we judged someone based on their appearance missing the incredible story or power they hold inside. If you enjoyed this story of Justice Served Cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness is always free, but disrespect can cost you everything. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.